How's it going, guys? Winter Kills here, and welcome to a brand new Atlantean Mermail deck profile for the January 2020 format. Now, of course, I did take a poll a few days ago asking you guys which version of this Mermail profile you'd like to see, whether it be post-Eternity Code and Master Rule 5 or this current format. The Eternity Code one was ahead, but a lot of you guys were saying in the comments, why not do both? And I'm down with that. We're just going to do both. We'll do one for January 2020 format and then one for post-Eternity Code. And if you guys want a sneak peek of what that Eternity Code list looks like or will look like, go to that test hand video. That'll be annotated up in the top right or at the end. In the description of that video, I posted the deck list that I used for that particular test hand video. So if you like what that deck was doing, the list for it will be in the description of that video. But I'll be making a separate profile on it later on, probably about a week from now or so. Also, huge announcement on February 9th on my Twitch channel, down in the description below, link to that. I will be doing a charity live stream for Wires of Australia, which is an amazing nonprofit organization that helps to rescue wildlife and care for them. Obviously, in wake of this recent wildfire, they've had a tremendous amount of work to do with all the terrible things that have been happening there. I'm sure most of you guys have seen about it at this point. But they need all the help that they can to be able to do the amazing work that they do, and I want to help support them, using the platform that I have been given to help support in whatever way I can. So on February 9th, I'll be doing a charity live stream. We'll be doing some cool incentives and some giveaways for those that donate, so be sure to check that out. I'll post a link to the details down in the description. My link to my Twitch will be down there as well. I posted about it on my Discord, my Facebook, my Twitter, even on YouTube in the community section, but I figured I'd mention here at the beginning of the video as well, because more people will probably see it. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into the profile. Of course, sleeves and mats from Imperium Duelist. Check them out down in the description. And of course, if you're buying anything off a TCG Player, do not forget to use my affiliate link. But you guys know how this works. We're going to do the standard rundown of the profile, and then we'll get into the breakdown. So first things first, 3 Mermail Abyss Megalo, 3 copies of the shiny Mermail Abyss Teus, 2 copies of Mermail Abyss Pike, 2 copies of the Mermail Abyss Gun, 1 Mermail Abyss Mander, finally found this card, 3 copies of Neptibus the Atlantean Prince, 3 copies of Atlantean Dragoons, 2 copies of Atlantean Heavy Infantry, and who could forget the 1 heavy, or not heavy marksman, but 1 Atlantean Marksman, 1 Deep Sea Diva, wait, not 1, but 2 Deep Sea Diva, 1 copy of Moon Glacia, 1 Lapis Dragon, 2 Aqua Spirit, and for the last monster, 1 Sinister Serpent. Now we'll move on to the spells. We have 3 copies of Instant Fusion, then following that we have 3 copies of Call by the Grave, making sure our Diva goes through, 2 copies of Moray, 1 copy of Pot of Avarice, 1 Upstart Goblin, 1 for 1, 1 Monster Reborn, and 1 Abyss Scale of the Mizuchi. Now that rounds out the 40 card main deck. We'll go into the extra deck. And to start for the extra deck, we have, of course, 1 True King of All Calamities, 1 Mermail Abyss Gaios, 1 Squalo Bahamut or Bahamut Shark, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 Totally Awesome. That's it for the Xyz. Then we have 1 Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier, 1 White Aura Whale, 1 Bryonic Dragon of the Ice Barrier, 1 Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess, 1 Mermail Abyss Alacia, 1 Mistar Boy, 1 Marincess Coral Anemone, 1 Cross Sheep. This is already out by now. I know it's still a proxy, but it's out in Ignition Assault, 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp, and 1,000 Eyes Restrict for some instant fusion targets. So that's it for the quick profile. Now we'll go ahead and do the breakdown. So here I have pulled out the starter cards for this deck, and first and foremost, we have a copy, the 3 copies rather, of Mermail Abyss Teus. This card is hands down one of the best starters in the entire deck and has been pretty much since its inception, simply requiring only 1 water monster to discard to be able to search out any level 4 or lower Mermail monster, which could be Gund, Mander, or Abyss Pike, basically tailoring to whatever situation you're in currently, whether you need to revive a Mermail out of grave, or you need a normal summon in the form of Pike, or you need a crucial combo piece in order to put out a game-ending card like True King of All Calamities in the form of Abyss Mander. This card is extremely versatile. Not only that, but it can trigger your Atlanteans as well, your Prince, your Dragoons, your Infantry, and your Marksmen. And this card, paired with Dragoons, of course, is possibly one of the best openings this deck can have. So, of course, 3 copies of Mermail Abyss Teus are in this lineup, hands down. And also, who could forget 3 copies of Neptibus, the Atlantean Prince? I don't want to say it, but this card probably is the star of the show, hands down, because this single card gets your entire engine going 100%. So, basically sends any Atlantean monster to the graveyard to add any Atlantean monster upon normal summon. or not even on summon, just it's an effect that it has while it's on field. You can send one Atlantean from the deck to be able to add one, and then of course, if it is sent, if it is pitched to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, you can basically reborn any Atlantean monster in your graveyard. So not only is it a great starter by allowing you to get your Dragoons to the graveyard very easily, to be able to add Dragoons on top of that and add a card like Megalo, to be able to pretty much get you like 90% of the way there to be able to start making more plays. But if it can also act as an extender in the hand by being discarded by off of any cards like Pike, Megalo, or Teus. This card is absolutely fantastic all around. Also a 1-for-1 target, not to mention. This card is amazing, hands down a starter. So next we have 2 copies of Pike. This card I still really like in here because it is a normal summon, yes, but this card is a great discard target off of your Teuses, or more specifically Megalo with that Gund combined, to be able to revive this card, to give yourself another discard outlet, to be able to continue comboing and be able to search more cards and be able to overall build a better board. I just like Pike essentially at the end of the day because it just gives you more options. I don't really like being limited to just like 1 or 2 search targets off of my Teus. This card is fantastic and that can search out a ton of different cards, so I wanted to be able to give myself more options within the main deck. And it is a water monster, so it just helps to add to the overall consistency when we're trying to resolve cards like Megalo and Teus, which ultimately are cards that help you to win the game, as they search for great cards, they help set up your board via discarding, and things like that. So I definitely really like Abyss Pike still, even with the second copy of Diva being added into the main deck, so I'm still opting to play it here in this current format. And then obviously, Deep Sea Diva, this card summons out Prince, so there's really not much else to be said about that. Can be very, very prone to hand traps, unlike Neptibus, but still nonetheless a very powerful combo piece, a very powerful starter in the deck. Next, we have Moray of Greed. This card I'm opting to choose as a starter card, while albeit it could be an extender. Sometimes it can be completely dead, and if your opening hand is like all spells. But you do play a lot of water monsters in this deck, and sometimes you can take any random 2 water monsters in your hand, shuffle them back into the deck at a chance to possibly change that into Teus Dragoons, plus Megalo, whatever it may be. So this card does give you more chances, more options to be able to turn bad hands, mediocre hands into workable, playable hands to allow you to combo. And then lastly, we have 1-for-1 here, which is basically a 4th copy of Prince, increasing the consistency of this deck to be able to get this card in action, to be able to help you make plays and do what this deck wants to do, which is either set up a really strong first turn board through a myriad of different extra deck monsters, or use its in-engine removal cards and extra deck removal cards to be able to get the job done going second and OTK. So that is it for the starters. Now we'll go ahead and take a look at the superior extenders. So here we have now laid out in front of us our superior extenders. Of course, the cards that help add on to the plays that our starter cards make. Now, starting with Abyss Megalo, this card could 100% be classified as a starter card simply because he can activate Dragoons upon special summoning him by discarding 2 waters. But his activation requirement is a bit more heftier than that of Teus, so that's why for this specific video, I'm opting to label him as a superior extender, because I think he is sort of the pinnacle of that, in the definition of that term anyways, especially when compared to a card like Teus. Now, on special summon, he does allow you to add Abyss spell or trap, so in this case, we can search Mizuchi, but you can also search cards like Abyss Sphere, or Cetus, or Kraken, to be able to have an option of different things to be able to negate. So this card is incredible simply because, he can tribute a attack position water, so he can tribute a card like Dragoons or Prince on board to be able to attack twice and then trigger that effect of whatever you're tributing, since it was sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect. So he can, activate water monster's effects and trigger your Atlanteans on board, but it can also do it in hand, by really kickstarting your opening plays by being able to discard 2 waters. So that could be a Dragoons and a Prince, or a Dragoons and Inventory going second to be able to destroy a card and also search a Sea Serpent. So this card, definitely a powerhouse in the deck, and one of your main win cons essentially. It allows you to make rank 7s, allows you to put on damage, gives you a good, equipped target for your Mizuchi, searches out Mizuchi, essentially to be able to negate spells. So this card is absolutely fantastic. And it basically can search out a spell that can negate Super Poly, which is something you might be wondering how is that possible, but we'll explain that later. Then we have 3 Dragoons. This card is hands down probably one of the best superior extenders ever printed, simply because if it's sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, you can add a Sea Serpent from your deck to your hand, and that is not a once per turn. So we're trying to resolve this card as many times as possible within a given turn, because the more we can resolve it, the better off we will be, the more hand advantage we will be, the more plays we'll be able to make, the things like that. So you can trigger this card's effect in a myriad of different ways, whether you discard him off of Megalo, Teus, Pike, you're detaching him off of a Bahamut Shark or an Abyss Dweller, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways you can activate his effects. That's why we play discard outlets like Pike, like Teus, like Megalo, and other options in the form of your Bahamut Shark and your Abyss Dweller. And this card is even easier to resolve now that we have Cloth Heap or Cross Sheep in the game, and cards like Instant Fusion with Mud Dragon of the Swamp. So this card is absolutely fantastic. Nothing else to be said about that. 2 copies of Abyss Gund. This card is amazing. If it's discarded, period, doesn't have to be by a water monster. If it's just discarded, you can special summon any Mermail monster in your graveyard. It is a once per turn, so that's really I'm going to be playing 1 or 2 copies of it. I would like to see it in my opening hand a bit more because, being able to have the option again, like I said earlier, to search out Pike alongside this with the Teus and then be able to set up the Gund Pike play with a Megalo later on in the turn is always nice because it just allows you to put more advantage and more pressure onto the board. So I've always liked the double Gund because a lot of games you will most likely go through 2 and you will want to have the second one to be able to search. At least that's what I found in most of my experiences. So this card is amazing for just getting more bodies on board to help reviving things that you may have linked off or detaches material, whatever it may be. So absolutely fantastic for that. 2 copies of Aqua Spirit. Basically, you can just summon itself to the field by banishing any water in your graveyard. And it also hits the board as a level 4 water. And some of the best plays this deck can make are making some rank 4s. And some of those rank 4s include like Dweller, which is absolutely amazing. And of course, Bahamut Shark, which summons out totally awesome. Like I said earlier, which is even easier to do with Cross Sheep. So getting basically easier access to level 4s is what we want, and Aqua Spirit allows us to do that. Other options include cards like White Stingray or the Tenyi Spirit, the water one. They all have their drawbacks. One requires a discard, which you may not want to do because that card cannot trigger Atlanteans. If it could be like a staple in here, hands down. This card, if you don't have a way to get a water engrave, you can't make it live. And the Tenyi guy, if you draw him later on in a given game, he's just completely dead in your hand. So they all have their drawbacks. I think Aqua Spirits is probably the least, mainly because, at least in this specific format, I think maybe would prefer playing White Stingray later on, just because it can discard a card to make your Deep Sea Ari alive. But Aqua Spirit, basically, if you can't make it live, it means you can't get a water engrave, which means you're having a really, really bad turn. So odds are, if you can't resolve Aqua Spirit anyways, you're probably losing the game anyways. So that's just the way I like to look at it. Then we have 3 copies of Instant Fusion. So basically this with any 2 monsters now allows you to set up a rank 4 play of some sort, especially if you've already resolved Dragoons. This card could be considered an additional extender, but it is amazing, especially with Cross Sheep. I wouldn't have considered this card to be too good prior to Cross Sheep's release. I'd probably be playing a Sekka's Light version. Obviously that gets more difficult now with it being at 1, so that's why I think it's great that we have Cross Sheep and we can sort of go to a non-Sekka's Light build. Because we have that option now with Cross Sheep to be able to sort of use Norden with more steps, essentially to be able to combo off more. And then, of course, Monster Born, reviving anything from our graveyard to make more and better plays with. So that is it for the superior extenders. We'll go ahead and take a look at the additional extenders now. All right, so here we have our additional extenders in the form of Lapis Dragon, Moulin Glacier, Abyssmander, Marksman, Heavy Infantry, the Sinister Serpent. Yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. I'm actually playing this near. And the Pot of Avarice. So, of course, Moulin Glacier is a free body we can get on board once we've reached exactly 5 waters in the grave, and also helps to rip 2 cards from the opponent's hand. He can be used for link fodder if absolutely necessary, but if you do that, if he leaves the field, you will lose the battle phase of your next turn. So you won't be able to OTK the following turn, so you really have to be careful what you're doing with this card after you summon. In some cases, you can use Mander to be able to make a rank 8, which I'm currently not opting to play because I've never really had the space for a rank 8 in this deck, but it is an option nonetheless to be able to be played. And then Lapis Dragon, if this card is added from the deck to the hand, you can simply special summon to the field, and if it's also added from the grave to the hand, You can special summon to the field too, but it is banished once it leaves the field, so it does have a bit of a drawback there. But this card is great because it allows for easy link plays with Prince, or cool synchro plays with Prince to be able to go into Bryanak, or cards like White Aura Whale, and can also help set up possibly a Trish play in the extra deck. So help set up great synchro plays and link plays, which is amazing. And this card also single-handedly makes Prince instant fusion immediate access to Toad without taking anything else into account. So it's a great card. And next we have Mermail Abyss Manor. This card helps to modify levels, so he can basically turn any level 7 Mermail we have into a level 9 Mermail to be able to help overlay into that True King of all calamities. And since I'm playing this as a going first build, this card is great for that reason and that resource. Next, we have Atlantean Marksman. Yes, he can destroy set cards, but if he does inflict battle damage, he can special summon a level 4 or lower Atlantean Sea Serpent from the deck. So if you're in a really tight spot and the game state is extremely simplified, you can attack directly with the Marksman, and then also special summon out Prince, attack for 800 with, and then resolve the Prince hopefully in main phase 2 and get some plays going. So this card, while you're probably in most games you play aren't going to use that effective Marksman, sometimes it does come in handy and it can essentially save you. So this card is great for that. And then Infantry also does come in handy as an extender sometimes too, because if he is on the board, you can basically use this effect to gain an additional normal summon of a level 4 or lower Sea Serpent, whether it be Prince or Diva, to be able to resolve more synchro plays or more link plays, whatever it may be. So Infantry is also great for that. And then next we have the Sinister Serpent here, and yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. I'm actually playing Sinister Serpent in Mermails in 2020. Now this is a bit of an experiment, a part of an experiment. I want to see how many people are watching without sound who are also willing to comment, hey Winter, did you know that this card has an errata and you can't add it back every standby phase? So I'm interested to see how many of those comments I'm getting. And I'm also interested in seeing how many people start freaking out for no reason about why I shouldn't play this card because it's not good anymore. So that's also be another interesting thing to see in the comments as well. But for those of you that don't know what this card does, and I'll get to why I'm playing it in a moment, basically it says during your standby phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can add it to your hand. Also banish one Sinister Serpent from your graveyard during your opponent's next end phase. You can only use this effect of Sinister Serpent once per turn. So basically what this card can do essentially is that whatever given point you need extra waters in your hand to be able to make more plays with, whether it be to resolve a Teus that you're searching off Alacia next turn, or to resolve a Megalo off a top deck Prince you might have just had. This card seems extremely versatile, and a couple days ago this thought randomly popped into my head and I was like, Sinister Serpent. I know it's errated, but I kind of want to try it out and see what happens. And I'm going to a locals tomorrow, and I want to see how this card performs. It might be absolutely terrible. It might come in clutch more times than not. So it's just a bit of an experiment. Obviously, you don't have to play this card. You can play a third Infantry if you wanted to in place, or the 10E, level 4, whatever you want to play. It's up to you. This is just my personal choice. And next up, we have the Pot of Avarice. This card does have a pretty hefty activation requirement of needing 5 monsters in the graveyard. Be able to shuffle them all back in and then draw 2. So of course that's great for recycling your Dragoons, your Princes, your Infantries, and things like that. Basically allowing this deck to grind even longer than it's ever been able to in recent years without this card in the game. But it's amazing. But sometimes it can make your bad hands worse, because a lot of times you might find yourself dumping resources into the grave to make this card live to hopefully fix your hand. And you're kind of, it's kind of counterproductive because you're losing so much card advantage just in hopes to gain some card advantage. I mean, it's still great though. Like, the reward 100% outweighs the risk with that card, in my opinion. So that is it for the additional extenders. Now we'll take a look at core removal and some defensive cards and some reactive responsive cards and things like that. Some re-raise ceiling cards, whatever you want to call them. And yes, as you might have guessed, our only form of core removal, and that meaning basically removal cards that we have within our engine that we can actively search with our engine cards in the deck, that is the 2 Heavy Infantry and the 1 Marksman. I've been back and forth between 2 and 3 Infantry, especially with Alacia and the setup with this card being more important than ever to have that discard to be able to destroy a face-up card. So this card is great for that. And of course, Marksman, again, sometimes people don't play him at all, but I still think it's great to be able to sort of force out some back rows that your opponent might have, because if this card basically, if discarded off of a Water Monster's effect, you can destroy. This card basically, if sent to the graveyard off a Water Monster's effect, can destroy a set card, so it is really great for sussing out some back row sometimes, so I really like it for that. Next, we have some defensive cards. And these are the only defensive cards really in the main deck. You have the Mizuchi, which can negate spells, and then you have the Call by the Grave. This basically helps to also re-raise our ceiling if our opponent is trying to Ash Blossom us or Droll and Lockbird us. Call by the Grave can come in extremely helpful, and come in extremely clutch, rather. Call by the Grave can come in extremely clutch for help stopping cards like Ash Blossom on our Deep Sea Diva, which is now at 2, so be more likely to have that card come up in our opening hand, which means more chances for our opponent to Ash Blossom it. So Call by the Grave, really, really important in some aspects for that. Then Mizuchi, like I said, for stopping spells, can also boost up things by attack as well. So great for that. And also going for the OTK. And then last but not least, the one Upstart Goblin. The only purpose of this card is a placeholder card, essentially. You see me play it in most builds. Just be able to get the deck count below 40. Because once you see this card, you immediately can play it and draw into another card, which is great. So love this card, hands down. Now we'll take a look at the extra deck. All right, so for the extra deck, I have a few categories selected. The first one we'll look at is removal. Of course, these are basically the main core purposes of these cards is for removal. Trish, non-targeting removal in the form of banishing. So this card is amazing for this particular format for help outing cards like Borload and Avermax. So I really like it. It is harder to get into, no less, but it is still really great. White Aura Whale, mass removal, destroys all attack position monsters your opponent controls on summon. And does piercing damage and can attack up to 2 monsters, so great for putting on pressure. And if it's destroyed by card effect, you can banish a one in your graveyard, immediately special summon it back out to your field. That is not a once per turn effect. It also becomes a tuner once it comes back too. Then of course, the Bryonic, the beautiful, beautiful Bryonic here. Basically, you can discard any number of cards and then bounce those same number of cards in the field back to the hand. It is a once per turn. This is not the eroded version, so it is a once per turn. But basically you can trigger Atlanteans off of it and also bounce things your opponent controls back to the hand, so that's great for clearing some cards that can't be destroyed by card effects, things that like White Aura Whale wouldn't be able to deal with, or things that you can't deal with Trish because you might not be able to get into Trish at that given point. And then of course, Thousand Eyes Restrict is just another option for instant fusion essentially, because I am playing 3 instant fusion. I wanted to have a instant fusion target for going second, so Thousand Eyes Restrict is great for that. Next up, we have Floodgates, Abyss Dweller, True King of All Calamities. These guys are amazing for floodgating certain opponents, stopping effects, and stopping graveyard effects. These cards, of course, go hand in hand, being absolutely amazing for floodgating the opponent. Then we have some extenders in the form of these cards here. Squallow Bahamut, Coral Anemone, Cloth Heap, Mud Dragon. This card really could be considered an engine requirement in the extra deck, if you will, because if we're playing Instant Fusion, we obviously need a card in the extra deck that will take up a slot to be able to use it. But these cards go hand in hand. Anemone can bring back Prince, can bring back Infantry. There's nothing else to be said about that. It's great. Bahamut Shark, not only can it detach the Dragoons, but it also summons out totally awesome. Same thing with Abyss Dweller. You could argue on the scale, this card could be considered a extender because it can detach Dragoons and trigger its effects since it is a water. And then we have a few bit of defensive cards here in the extra deck as well, in the form of Gaios, totally awesome, Appaloosa, Mistarboy, and the Mermail Abyss Alacia. Of course, this card is also considered, you could consider it a floodgate as well. Can basically skill drain the field, which is nice. Prevents level 5 or higher monsters from attacking, and it can negate anything that has less attack than it. So this card is great, totally awesome. Of course, offers up interruption, takes whatever it negates, and adds back a water. So this card is great. Appaloosa can put up tons of negations, and it gives you, a way to link off cards like Cloth Heap later on in the turn to be able to boost up your field with more interruptions. Mistarboy adds back resources and can also boost up your field. And then Alacia, of course, offers a discard outlet for cards like Infantry during your opponent's turn. Can search your Mermail cards during your opponent's turn, like Teus. And then once it hits the graveyard, your opponent destroys it, you get huge pluses off of it as well. So a very, very defensive card for this deck, and hands down one of the best cards in the extra deck. You could cut the other Mistarboy for a second Alacia, but the main reason I play Mistarboy is because I am playing Anemone, and I want to be able to, a way to be able to link off the Anemone, if need be, into a card like Mistarboy, because you can't link it off into Alacia because it is a Cyberse. So now we'll talk about side decking. So for this particular build, I'll just thumb through here and throw some things that I would side out. Call by the Grave could be one of them. You could side out the Marksman if the matchup is not playing any back row, so that is very situational. Sinister Serpent could be sided out, hands down. Pot of Avarice could be sided out. One copy of Megalo could be sided out potentially. I wouldn't really recommend it, but it is something you can do. You can easily side out of an Aqua Spirit and an Instant Fusion. Side out a Monster Reborn. That's an easy side out one of the Pikes. And that's really about it. So you do have plenty of options for side decking in this deck. You can side out some of your main engine pieces because you do play multiples of them and can search them pretty easily. But there's also a lot of other 3-ofs that can be sided out as well in place of more side deck cards. But I wouldn't side out, again, cards like Upstart, cards like your Moray of Greed, simply because you need those to keep up your consistency going into the following games. But yeah, that's going to do it for this TCG Legal January 2020 Atlantean Mermail deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. How many of you guys were expecting the Sinister Serpent? Again, I'll let you guys know how it goes at locals. And also, again, reminder, my charity live stream I'll be doing on February 9th at around 7 p.m. EST. So don't forget to check that out. Would love to see as many people there as possible. It's for a great cause. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, Winter Kill signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one.